Hi, I'm Matt Jackson working with Gym Club Solutions, and today we're going to be looking at a video to help develop bent arm, bent body press to handstand for rings. So we're going to start looking at the first progressions for bent arm, bent body press to handstand. We're going to start the development as always, not even on the apparatus, on the floor. Today we're going to be using a set of parallettes. And important to note, when we're using the parallettes today, we're going to be putting the bars in a V position. This is for the reasons of when you're on rings, we want the rings to be turned out and not turned in, so we can perform the bent arm, bent body press to handstand correctly. So we're going to move on to the floor, and we're going to use the bars, like I said, in the V position with the gymnast. And the first stages we're going to look at this stage you should already be able to do a straight arm body press to handstand. We're going to then start developing it with the bent body press. So before we even get to that stage, we're going to do a half lever, and then we're going to do a stooped lift, getting the hips above the gymnast's head in a nice folded position, and then come back down into half lever. So gymnast will start in half lever. We want the gymnast's body to fold, bring the shoulders on top of the hands into that pike body press and back to half lever. So scooping up, shoulders on top of the hands, nice folded position with the chest in, and then back to half lever. Okay, when developing the piked body, bent arm, bent body press to handstand, it's important to note that you can see from some of the preparations we're going to be doing in the video that the gymnast's flexibility is a big factor. So if they're struggling with their flexibility, especially in their hamstrings and their pike fold, then please refer to previous videos that have been done on flexibility. If this is a limiting factor for your gymnast, then let's work on these areas before we get to this stage. Okay, the next stage we're going to look at with the gymnast is moving from the half lever into the pike press. We're then going to bring the gymnast's feet onto an elevated surface. So today we're going to be using a block in the gym. This could be crash mats in the gym. It could be anything that you can build that makes a raised surface for the gymnast to put their feet onto. So it doesn't really matter if you don't have a block, just use whatever you can use in your gym setup. So we'll show how this works now on the parallettes. Again, we're using the bars in the V position for rings. Okay, the gymnast will start in half lever. Again, scooping their chest in, bringing their feet up above their head, and then their toes are going to touch onto the block. And at this point, you can see the gymnast's hips are above their head, their shoulder angle is open, and their toes are going to be pointed onto the block. This is to make the right position before we start looking at the bent arm press. As always, when building strength skills like this, we need to do multiple repetitions to build up the gymnast's strength. So we're going to then add in 3 repetitions of the skill. Again, when the gymnast can do 3, you can build this up to 5 and 7 and plus as they get stronger. So we're going to go now through the same stages to bring the gymnast's feet onto the block, but then we're going to come back into half lever and go back up again. So scooping up, toes will touch the block, show the position, and then we're going to come back down, back to half lever. And we're repeating the same technique, making sure the gymnast understands all of the positions we want them to hit as we're working through the skill. Okay, when breaking down the bent arm, bent body press to handstand, we need to look at all different phases. We're now going to look at a headstand handstand on the floor in the pike position to simulate the second phase of the press to handstand. So we're going to start this on the floor to really look at the gymnast's shapes and technique, building up their strength with the bent arm, bent body press to handstand. So we're going to do this with the gymnast on the floor. We'll ask the gymnast to start in a pike position again, so their hips are going to be above their head. Their head position is going to come forwards onto the floor, so they're going to make that bent press with their ribs in and their elbows here. Then we want the gymnast's feet to come above their head, and then they're going to press open into handstand. Okay, as always, we're now going to start to do multiple repetitions of this skill. So the gymnast is going to perform the same headstand, handstand with a pike body press, but we're going to do 3 to 5 repetitions. Again, when this becomes easy for the gymnast, this is going to start to develop their strength and the second half of the skill. Then when we put the skill together, this will all benefit the gymnast. This is to look at the shapes and start to build the strength. Again, when you're supporting this, you want your hand around the gymnast's shoulder and the other hand's going to be around their knees so we can guide the gymnast into the right shape in handstand. The front arm is to control their position and make sure they're in the right shape. The second hand on the legs is to direct the press to handstand. We'll do multiple repetitions now. So the gymnast's head will tip, their chest will come in, and making the second phase of the press to handstand. Okay, we're now moving on to the more advanced progressions for the bent arm, bent body press. So we're going to use the V bars on the floor. We're going to do the same as the previous preparation with the headstand, handstand, but at this stage we're going to start looking at the gymnast's head position also when they arrive in handstand. When teaching on rings, it's really important to understand as the rings move and they're not static like we are on the floor, the gymnast's head position needs to be slightly elevated, creating a small shoulder angle so that we can start to understand how to control the rings when we're doing the press to handstand. So we're going to show that now. So again, we're going to make the press with the bent arms, hips coming above the head. As the gymnast opens to handstand, we want their chin to be slightly raised, looking at the floor in front of them. This is then to create a small shoulder angle to give us stability with the handstand on the rings. Okay, moving on to our next progression, we're going to again be using the V bars on the floor, shaped for the angle of holding the rings, the elevated block, and we're going to get the gymnast now to do the pike press to handstand, bring their feet onto the elevated block, and then they're going to perform multiple handstand dips in this position. Remembering at the top of each press, the gymnast should have their head slightly raised, looking at the floor to simulate the same position as they would do when they're on the rings. Okay, the next progression we're going to look at for the bent arm, bent body press. Again, we're using the V bars. The gymnast's going to have their feet on the block. This time we're going to start with the gymnast's feet on the block. They're going to perform the headstand dip and then take their feet off the block into the press to handstand. Again, we're going to start with low numbers and then we're going to build up the numbers as they get stronger. Vital to start with low numbers and good shape so the skill is performed properly, and then when the shapes are right, then increase the numbers to build the gymnast's strength. Okay, we're now going to get the gymnast to perform the full skill connected together with a small pause in the pike position to check the right shape before we open into the handstand. So we're going to again use the V bars and the block, and we'll go through the whole skill now on the floor bars before we start to take the press onto the actual rings. So the gymnast will still make the pike fold, toes onto the block, perform the headstand dip, and then open to handstand. Okay, we're now in the final stages of doing the bent arm, bent body press on the floor bars before we put it onto the actual rings. So the gymnast is now going to perform the stoop press with the soft mat in front of them, thinking about if the gymnast drops over the top, we just have the safety mat there in case. Also, because we're asking the gymnast to elevate their head slightly for the rings position, this can cause a little bit of instability in the lower back until they learn how to control this. So if they do pass over the top, we've got the soft safety mat in front. As you can see in the previous clip, we've shown a common mistake that will happen when learning bent arm, bent body press to handstand. Sometimes the gymnast's legs will come out from the pike press early, making their chest come out and their heels go over their head. So we want to correct this properly on the floor bars before we take this onto the rings. When doing it on rings and they're high, if this happens, the gymnast is going to pass over the top. So we really want to get rid of this fault in the early stages to make sure the skill is consolidated properly. Okay, so moving on to more progressions now. We're actually moving on to the actual rings now. We're going to do a bent arm, bent body press, but stopping in the shoulder stand position. We're going to focus on the gymnast's chest position, their head position, and what they're doing with the rings. This is to make sure that their arms are not leaning against the cables when they start to learn the bent body, bent arm press to handstand. Okay, moving on to the next progression on the actual rings, we're going to get the gymnast to pass through the stage before and then slowly open their feet towards a shoulder stand position. Important when we're doing this part to keep the gymnast's feet slightly behind the rings, so as they open, they finish in a handstand and not pass through the rings and drop over the top. The gymnast will pike in again, bringing the elbows in, and then bringing the feet just slightly this side of the cables, holding that position there. Important for their understanding of when they open in the right shape to handstand. Okay, so we're now going to try the full press to handstand, but we're going to use the aid of the rings with the gymnast's feet. This is to give them a bit of stability in handstand and to check that they're looking in the right place and turning the rings in the right place. Once the gymnast can do this, then we can move on to performing the full skill, holding the handstand at the end. So again, the gymnast is going to pike first, bringing the elbows in, go through the shoulder stand, open to handstand, and just use the cables for a little bit of stability here. Again, we want to see the gymnast's head slightly lifted and looking forwards, and the gymnast's rings really working hard to turn out this way. So their little fingers are turned in and their elbows are locked. Okay, we're now moving on to the final stages of the bent arm, bent body press on rings. The gymnast is now going to start to work freely, now understanding all of the right positions. Again, we're going to use the cables for the gymnast for this last preparations. They're going to put their feet onto the cables, just for that fine little bit of balance to understand the positions. Again, focusing on their head position and their arm position. Super important when we're doing these shapes so that we can hold the handstand without dropping through the rings. Okay, as you can see in the previous preparation, the gymnast was using his feet on the cables for a bit of stability. We're now going to allow the gymnast to try and play with taking their feet off the cables after they've arrived in handstand. This is to really fine-tune the skill and get the balance at the end of the skill so the gymnast can hold the handstand. So they'll do the press on their own, touch their feet on the cables, and then slowly, when they feel the balance, bring their feet off the cable into handstand and control the lift to handstand. Okay, so now we're going to show the full skill with the gymnast doing the skill unsupported. So the full bent arm, bent body press to handstand without the cables now. Thanks for watching our video tutorial today on bent arm, bent body press to handstand. Please take everything away, build the stages safely and progressively. So if your gymnast is struggling with one stage, keep them at that stage or even take it back a stage. When their strength develops, move on to the next progression. Important not to rush to make sure the skill is developed properly and the gymnast can do it consolidated on their own at the end of the technique.